Hello, everyone. My name is Ufoma Ibaroro, and here at the School-Based Health Alliance, we would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar titled, How Youth Are the Key to Tackling the Stigma on Mental Health. During today's presentation, attendees will learn about tools and resources that aid in the development of language and programming to combat the stigma on mental health and discuss how school-based health centers are the ideal location for staff and youth to collaboratively address the stigma, leading to greater success in school and life. Before we begin, if you are viewing as a group, please open the chat window by clicking on the chat tool and type in the name of the person registered for this webinar and the total number of additional people in the room. This will help us with our final attendance count. The School-Based Health Alliance is the national school-based healthcare advocacy, technical assistance, and training organization based in Washington, D.C. The School-Based Health Alliance works to improve the health of children and youth by advancing and advocating for school-based healthcare. As youth-friendly and accessible settings, school-based health centers are uniquely positioned to deliver high-quality, confidential services that equip children and adolescents with the information, tools, and support they need to be healthy and safe where they are when they need it in school. We believe that all children and adolescents deserve to thrive. When health and education come together, great things happen. Now we have a few housekeeping reminders. All attendees are in listen-only mode. However, we want to hear your questions. To ask a question at any point during this webinar, please use the chat tool located in your Zoom control bar. We will address questions following the presentation. Also, at the end of this webinar, attendees will be asked to complete evaluation poll questions. Please let us know how we are doing. Your feedback is vital in helping us craft presentations that meet your needs. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived on our website in 1 to 3 business days. Please also visit the School-Based Health Alliance website for additional archived webinars for topics such as the ones you are viewing on your screen. The School-Based Health Alliance's Youth Advisory Council is a youth-led service group that brings young people ages 16 and up together for a 1-year term of leadership, advocacy, and service. Through the council, youth share their expertise on important health topics, build connections with the network of youth who are passionate about school-based health, and cultivate knowledge and skills about public health and youth development. There are currently 8 members and 5 are here to present today. We'll be hearing from Bila Salafu, a senior at South Hagerstown High School, Christina Vo, a sophomore at Silver Creek High School, Emma Bitar, a senior at Lakewood Ranch High School, Andre Amar, an MBA graduate from Albany State University, and Brooklyn Waller, a senior at Bryant High School. Emma?
Thank you so much, Ufoma. Again, I'm Emma, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I, along with my fellow Youth Advisory Council members, will be talking about the role stigma plays in our ability to provide mental health education, care, and services. To start off, we're going to explore a few scenarios to see how well you can identify potential mental health issues and stigma. The first scenario. Alexa has been feeling sad for a few weeks now. She stopped doing things that she used to love, like playing soccer and painting, and she always feels really tired. She told her parents about how she's been feeling, but they told her to just get over it. Alexa doesn't know what to do and feels like she's trapped. When you're ready, I'd like you to type in the chat box your answer to the question, what mental health issue do you think is present? Okay. Everyone's been responding depression, which is correct. with feeling sad for a few weeks, stop like withdrawing from the things that she used to enjoy, and feeling really tired. I believe all of you were correct in saying that was depression. Now I'd like you to respond to the next two questions, which is there stigma present? And if there is, how do you think the situation could have been handled better? Yep, parents could have been more understanding and comforting. Parents ignoring. Parents should have acknowledged her feelings and talked it out. Yep, again, all of you are correct in that the parents are the source of that stigma. By telling her to just get over it makes it seem like her mental health isn't as important as her physical health. So awesome. We're going to move on to the next scenario. So Emmanuel was sexually abused when he was younger. He frequently experiences nightmares, flashbacks, and panic attacks. He really wants to go to his school-based health center to get help, but he's scared of what his guardians and peers might think. He doesn't want them to think he is crazy or sick. So again, when you guys are ready, can you respond with what mental health issue you think is present? Okay, lots of PTSD, couple anxiety, trauma. Yeah, so again, basically all of you got it right. We were going for PTSD in this scenario because he was experiencing nightmares, flashbacks, and panic attacks as a result of his trauma. So yep, PTSD. And then for the next question, again, the same as the last time, is there stigma present? And if there is, how do you think it could have been handled better? Concerned about what other people think. Maybe people around him calling the health issues crazy. Fear of judgment. Yep. Seek out a support group. Yeah, so this one's a little more, there's lots of different answers and ways to answer this. There's definitely stigma present because obviously his environment somehow shaped him into thinking that him seeking help will make him seem crazy or sick, which obviously isn't the case. So that could be from a multitude of ways, whether that's his parents, friends, whatever it is, but there's definitely stigma present. Okay, this is our last scenario. Max has frequent mood swings. One day, his friend Blake told him to stop being so bipolar. Max is now really concerned that he may have bipolar disorder. Meanwhile, another friend of theirs, Jamie, actually has bipolar disorder and takes offense to the term bipolar being used incorrectly. So, what mental health issue do you think is present? So, not enough information, bipolar could be several, need more info. Mood disorder, possibly could be bipolar. Kids have moods. Max is unknown. Jamie has bipolar. Need more info. Anxiety at the least. Not enough info. Could be hormonal. Yeah, so this one was a bit of a trick. Jamie, who it explicitly says has bipolar disorder, is the only person who clearly has a mental health issue in this scenario. And now for the next question, again about, is there stigma present? And if there is, how do you think the situation could be handled better? Label. Max should tell Blake not to use that language. Bipolar is being used incorrectly. Lack of understanding of what bipolar disorder actually is. Refrain from labeling. Stigma's present. Need to talk to someone responsible to figure out what's going on. More education and communication will decrease the lack of understanding. Yeah, so again, this is perfect. The point of this one was that I know definitely around my peers and people at my school that I always hear the word bipolar being thrown around without people actually understanding what it really means. So that's the stigma that we were going for in this scenario with, like many of you mentioned, labeling and lack of education, because obviously bipolar disorder is not just having mood swings. It's much deeper than that. But not many people realize that. So yeah, great job, everyone. So now that we've explored how stigma can hinder someone's ability to seek the help that they need, we're going to watch a quick video that talks about the importance of fighting mental health stigma.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough? Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today, which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
Before I move on, I saw that someone asked where we can get the video. If you go to YouTube and type in "break the stigma," I believe it's the first video that pops up, and it was created by, as you saw at the end, Children's Colorado. So in order to view mental health simply as health, we must have conversations with youth so that we are able to identify stigma and understand how to address that stigma. Isla and Andre are going to dive deeper into the importance of youth involvement in our efforts to break the stigma.
Thank you, Emma. So looking specifically into the connection and impact of stigma on youth, we want to see that there are definitely multiple aspects that might hinder teens from being fully open about mental health. And some of the major components noted here are the cultural, societal, and medical components. As you saw in the video, again, there are still remnants of stigma in our society based on the past. And also when it comes to cultural aspects, different minority communities or just communities in general have different beliefs when it comes to stigma. And in turn that affects coping behaviors just because of the different outlooks when it comes to seeking mental health services or psychological openness in general. And also social media, because of the technological uprises, there's this standard that people try to reach, and it creates this unrealistic image for adolescents being at such a fragile state in life. When you're still developing, it's hard to see what you're supposedly supposed to reach in terms of like your character. And also this creates a false sense of entrapment just because, again, it creates this unrealistic image. And then of course medical facilities are a huge impact and a huge role on when it comes to youth being open to their mental health, because this is a place where they're supposed to feel accepted and open, and having a lack of that will definitely negatively impact youth's willingness to express their mental health concerns. So now I'm going to take it over to Andre, and he's going to talk more specifically about how we used a youth-based approach to gather some insight and ideas from youth when it comes to mental health stigma.
Thank you, Bala. So when dealing with the research that Bala and I conducted, we wanted to focus on basically the youth, of course. And YPAR, for those of you who may or may not know, it stands for Youth Participatory Action Research. So with the Youth Participatory Action Research, there are some steps that it highlights. One of those first steps is to identify. So when you're dealing with this type of tool, it allowed us to think about the issues or problems that we have at hand and what we're exactly trying to achieve. The next step, as you see, is define. So in order to tackle an issue or problem, you must be able to define what the problem is and define what the issue is so that you can better go about then, which takes us to our next step, identifying what exactly you need to solve that problem. So after identifying the problem, then you go to determination. What methods and approach do you need exactly to collect this information, and how can you work with your constituents to achieve your goal at hand? The final step that we want to point out, of course, is use the information that you have gathered, whether it be from an educational area, understanding and strategic plan, and or community. You're using all these things to ultimately create a change, and that change is the product of the research that you guys can see today.
YPAR is set on a basis of principles that are pretty much formulated upon youth opinions that are solicited, respected, and applied. So essentially, youth identify their own problems and possible solutions to those problems through project ideas, carry out planning, and different methods when it comes to goal setting. So the whole theme here is for youth to drive the process and take accountability for the fact that these issues and these societal problems affect youth, and it's up to youth to take charge and also start that initiative and start that conversation. And essentially, again, it's about youth teaching other youth about the problems that affect youth.
Specifically here, we wanted to talk about how we used YPAR to ultimately get the research that we got. And primarily, like I said earlier, YPAR focuses on mobilizing youth and young people and even professionals to basically get information. And then once you get that information and utilizing it to achieve your goal. And in this case, we're specifically talking about mental health and how people can get more access to it and how is it affecting the youth. As you can see on our next bullet point, we want to just talk about our youth once again and how the Youth Advisory Council played a role in achieving this research, achieving the solutions and coming up with the solutions that we have developed together. And over here you can see a quote, and just a little bit about this quote, we wanted to point out that yes, youth are the reason why we do the work that we do. Youth are our primary stakeholders, which means they're going to be the people that benefit from the work that we do. So now we have a poll for you all. Some of you guys probably are familiar with YPAR, and now we're going to ask you guys with this poll, how many are familiar with YPAR? Okay, awesome. So we do see that we have some people who are familiar with YPAR, and we see some this is their first time ever hearing about YPAR. So that's absolutely okay, because that's why we gave you guys a little bit about what YPAR is. So thank you all for taking that poll.
All right, so how exactly did we use YPAR for our topic when it comes to mental health stigma? As you can see, we utilized the survey across a number of states on the left here. So we surveyed youth ages 16 to 24 from April 3rd to the 22nd of this year, 2020. And we were looking at personal and secondhand accounts when it comes to mental health stigma, and we wanted to see the similarities and differences when it came to the perception of said stigma. And on the right here, you can see that we had a total survey of 56 takers. And so because of everything that's going on due to COVID-19, most of our outreach was used through social media and virtual apps like Google Classroom, Remind, and also personally messaging people through iMessage and direct messaging. And this comes to show how flexible the framework is and how important it is to be resourceful when you're trying to get information. We were also able to use our other council members to get more outreach. And you can see on the right here that this is sort of a key for the survey that will follow. So you can see in the gray that indicates responses that come from personal accounts, meaning people who have received mental health services, and then the secondary count as in those who have not received mental health services, and then that lighter purple is for the combination of both.
So for our first question, as it relates to the research, we want to focus on the people who, and just ask them, what have they ever received mental health, and what even as it relates to even behavioral health services. And we want to ask them specifically more about their past. So here, as you all can see, We had somewhat close numbers, a no at 55.6% and a yes at 44.4%. Now this is pretty good. However, we want to get that yes to a 100%, at least not saying that they've had to receive it, but just saying they know somewhat about it, and we'll get more into that later on.
For those who have experienced mental health care, we wanted to know what that experience was like for them. And from the responses that you can see, it really differed, which was actually really interesting because it comes to show how varied it comes when it, comes to personal experiences, especially with mental health care. On the top right corner, you can see that someone said that I had been able to access what I need. And then someone else had said it was hard to find someone that they could feel trusted while being a minor. And then others had said it was difficult to find a therapist due to whether it be healthcare problems or, again, that stigma or the opinion of their family members. So again, it was just kind of this dynamic role that everyone goes through something completely different, and then that essentially affects their experience when it comes to assessing mental health care.
So for this slide and this particular question, we want to focus on what types of resources or services are available to the individuals and to our demographic. So here we can see that one of the responses that we got was there are counselors in the school system that offer 3 free sessions. And then we have another statement that somewhat differs and is almost the opposite, because it says, my university provides services, but they're not actually that good and not easily accessible. Now, when we're dealing with mental health services, much like healthcare insurance, we want to make sure that it's affordable, and we also want to make sure that it's accessible easily to everyone, so that people are more likely and avid to go and get the help that they need as it relates, in this case, to their mental health or behavioral health.
So now that we've received insight from their experiences, we wanted to know, okay, how open were they when it comes to sharing this? And you can see that it was really on the fence, because 50% had identified themselves as somewhat open, whereas the remaining 20.8% said very open, and then there's open and not very open. We were happy to see that not very open was the lowest, but then again, it comes what I was saying before about the differences in the dynamics and how this is still something that's ever changing. And so we actually weren't really surprised to see that the majority were, quote unquote, somewhat open.
Here we just wanted to ask the audience if they knew anyone who had received the mental health services before. And here we have yes at majority, and we have no at the least. And this is something that was somewhat surprising, only because earlier we kind of saw that the numbers as far as people who actually received the health services was a little bit lower. So here, now we can see that a lot of people do know someone who's actually receiving mental health services or benefiting from attending a therapy, whether it be a therapy session, whatever it may be. We do have some people that do know of someone that is receiving mental health services.
Again, looking at the secondary accounts, we wanted to look at the other perspective of someone who was actually receiving this information, that someone close to them had received mental health services. And it was really great to see that everyone or the majority were happy to hear this information from whoever they're hearing it from. On the top left, you could see, I admired her openness because I have always wanted to seek mental health services. And then towards the bottom, you can also see, I was surprised that they were actually getting resources from the school. I had no idea we could ever get mental health services from school. And again, it just comes to show that by people being open and by people starting the conversation, it just kind of brings others out of the shadow. And that was really nice to see that, again, that this is something that isn't so closed off, that there's so many youth and there's so many people who want to express themselves and who want to seek mental health services, but it kind of takes that nudge or that push from someone else as, I guess, a sort of inspiration.
Okay, in this particular area, we want to focus on mental health and as it relates to someone's personal development. So here we can see that a lot of people do realize and understand that your mental health does have a correlation with your personal development as an individual, which is great. That tells us that people are taking mental health more serious because they do recognize the impact that it can have on them as an individual if they don't take care of their mental state. And the next question we want to also ask the audience and our demographic, do you think that mental health has any type of correlation or is as important as physical health? Here we also have a very strong yes and just a low percentage when it comes to that no. And this is also great to see because once again, we are noticing that people are taking mental health more seriously. They can also realize that, hey, if my mental state is not good, then that might affect my physical health in a negative way.
This graph here shows the relation between mental health services and other healthcare services for those who have received mental or behavioral health services in the past. And you can see that although, yes, mental health is the lowest, it isn't that far from the primary care and the dental care, which are deemed as important in society or as the most important. And, you know, it's definitely something that needs to improve. But for those, again, who have received these services, it was really interesting to see how that relates with other healthcare services and how it wasn't too far behind. But if you go into the next slide, for those who have not received mental health services, you can see how that differentiates and how there's a huge gap between the services that they seek. And if we just think back about what Andre was saying about how the majority of our survey takers considered mental health important to their personal development and that mental health was just as important as physical health, they all agreed yes with strong yeses with that. But here it doesn't reflect that. And then it comes to show, like I said, it's something that I feel the majority of youth feel is important internally, but it's not something that's implemented in everyday lives. And that, again, is something that is needing to be changed.
Okay, so here we want to focus on if the youth felt like mental health was supported in their school. And we can see that these numbers are close as far as, you know, the level of percentage. 42% is still a pretty high number for no. And yes, we are satisfied that at least more than half think that their school takes mental health seriously. However, we want to get this number to a 100% because as you guys can see thus far, mental health is something that's very serious. And if we have youth feeling like their school's not taking it serious, then who knows how that can be impacting them personally. Now, this next question, we want to ask more so about the community. And just to find out if the youth felt like their community is in support of mental health. And here, once again, these numbers are actually a little bit closer. And no is almost actually a 0.5%. And we're just above half for the yes. Now, once again, we do want to get that yes to at least 100% because we want all of our communities to know that mental health is serious. And we want the youth to know that, yes, mental health is something that is being taken seriously, not only in my school system, but on a higher level in my community. When I go home, when I'm on a playground, I want to know that my community supports my mental state because that can ultimately impact me when I eventually become an adult.
And again, looking more external to our survey takers, here we can see that it's still kind of that on the fence answer when it comes to how people as a whole are accepting when it comes to mental health. And again, we were kind of shocked to see that the yes was somewhat lower than the no, but at the same time, it was also not that surprising considering that the sometimes answer had swayed the majority of our test takers. And like we've been saying, this is something that definitely is calling for change because it definitely comes down to different perceptions and views of mental health.
Now for this question, we want to ask the youth about their racial background and did they think that it played a role in how open and comfortable people are with discussing mental health services and needs. Here, once again, like Bala said earlier, we have sometimes at the majority, which tells us that people are kind of somewhat on the fence and maybe they believe that race either doesn't or does not play and they kind of are like, you know, on the fence, kind of like going back and forth with themselves. Or maybe they've seen something to tell them, you know, it's been taken serious one day, but it's not been taken serious the next day. And then we also have, you know, always, which is pretty good. We want to get that number higher, at least to 100%, like some of my other numbers, because we want people to know that, yes, depending on where you come from and how you were raised, no matter what background you're from, it could play a part and it could be influential to your thoughts and beliefs. So over here in our next course, we want to also focus on the culture and just ask you, do they think that culture can play a role in how comfortable people are with discussing mental health services and needs? And once again, we do see that always is almost just close to the other one. It's just like a 0.1% higher because we see sometimes the other one was 61%. And over here, we can see that the always for this question was at 61.1%. And always, that's actually interesting because on this side, we see that sometimes is kind of means they're on the fence, when the always, they're not on the fence, and that's actually higher. So this one was actually quite interesting to see that culture was higher than race. And this was interesting because it looks like our youth can kind of somewhat view these two, culture and race, as two different things.
So here this shows that for the most part, youth do believe that mental health stigma does exist.
So for in this particular area, we wanted to ask our audience if they thought that there was a stigma when it came to mental health. And one of the things that I would definitely like to point out is that people believe what they see, and when it comes to mental health, it's not something one can physically see. So people don't always often believe that it's real. Now, on the other hand, we had someone to say that I think people think that it's something preventable or something that could be taken care of if people try hard enough. So these two statements I wanted to point out because one is saying that, you know, obviously you can't see someone's mental state. So I can't always walk up to somebody and just assume that they're happy, or I can't always walk up to somebody and just see that they're sad or they're going through something. So that's absolutely true. And this other statement, this person is basically saying that mental health is real, but people think that it can be preventable on its own. And mental health can not necessarily be preventable depending on where you come from, you know, because we have all gone through something in our lives that have caused us to be, whether it be sad, depressed, angry, upset, happy, mad, or just down altogether. And the best steps to take care of yourself when you get to this mental state and you see that it's not something that you can just easily prevent or easily avoid, you just go see someone. So that's why it's telling us in this particular statement that it can be taken care of if people try hard enough.
Here we can see that mental health stigma is still something that is experienced, and although the yes is lower, it's still relatively closer to the no, which is something that we weren't quite too happy to see.
And in this one, we want to talk about, we just want to focus on the health stigma and if people what prevented them or has prevented them from talking about mental health needs in their community or, you know, seeking services as it related to their mental health. And we see that there was a yes at a very high level. And that's just important because we want people to know that you don't have to feel crazy for talking about your mental health. We welcome that type of openness so that people can feel comfortable enough to go get help. This next question focuses on if the youth thought that there was any stigma towards someone talking about mental health needs or seeking mental health services. And that was also a yes, very high. And we definitely want to change the perception around mental health and people going to seek mental health.
All right, so here we wanted to get insight from youth on how they would change stigma. And again, the answers really range from teaching emotional intelligence in school. On the bottom, you can see talking to the public, having activities based on certain issues, media campaigns, and things like that. So youth definitely have an opinion on when it comes to actually normalizing it in medical facilities, schools, communities, etc.
Here we want to ask the youth and just to get them to thinking and talk about what could be their advice to health centers to reduce the stigma around mental health. And one thing that I would like to point out is posters, campaigns, taking time to inform students on each aspect of mental health, because we know a lot of things start when you're young. So we can tackle the importance and drive home the importance of mental health to our youth, then we can ultimately create a better society that is not afraid to be open with their mental status. And also, there is a responsibility for companies that are private and non-private to just support the idea of their app through their ads, show some posters, host some campaigns, that type of thing, when you have the ability and power to do so.
All right, so with all that data, what we really want you guys to take away from this is that stigma is still a huge barrier to fully embracing mental health as just another component to healthcare, whereas awareness is key to bridging the gap within our daily lives. And this includes marketing, integrating mental health in schools, and properly assessment of care within medical facilities. And this just shows that this is a collective movement, and it is starting with youth. And just like Emma was talking about in the beginning through the scenarios and the videos that she had shown, mental health is just as important as physical health, and it is important, and it's time to really understand and embrace the connection between the two, that one is not more important than the other. They're both equal in terms of importance and overall health. So now we're going to take it over to Christina, and she's going to talk more about how administrators, medical facilities can implement these changes through intervention case studies.
Thank you so much, Viola. So now we're going to be moving on to our interactive activity, where we'll be assessing 3 cases, one focused on an individual and the other 2 more community-based. So for our first sample case, Nick is 15. He comes from a large family of older brothers who are all now at university. He has never done as well at school as his brothers. And over the last year, his father has been making him bring in his homework after he's finished it. And sometimes there are big fights afterwards. Lately, when he goes to do his homework, he feels sick, gets headaches, and sometimes feels really dizzy. Last week, on the way home, he had to get off the bus because he got so nervous at the thought of going home that he couldn't breathe and thought he was going to throw up. So with this following situation, we have 2 follow-up questions. First question is, what are ways that youth and adults can help Nick in this situation? So I'm going to give you all some time to respond in the following chat box. Perfect. So we see in the sample case that Nick feels like he has to deal with the situation by himself, and he faces both the stress and anxiety from his father. And some of your responses answered with acknowledge and discuss his feelings. Great. Encourage Nick to breathe, visualization work, and imagine things to control his anxiety. Perfect. Talk to a mental health professional. Provide academic support such as tutoring. Help Nick talk to his father about the anxiety the sessions are causing, which are all great ideas to helping Nick throughout the situation. So we're going to move on to our second question to really transition on to really transition how we can develop a youth-led intervention in your school-based health center or school to prevent situations like NIC. So some of the responses are coming in is support group, peer support groups, peer tutoring, definitely. More responses, director of schools needs to be on board before anything can proceed, definitely. Study support skills, allot time in class for help, a hotline formed by trained youth, which is a great idea, created safe spaces and groups for youth, especially. And along with responses, right, Nick can go talk to other mental health professionals, but like you're all recommending, if he doesn't feel comfortable with talking with professionals, creating a youth-led mental health youth support group can be an easier way to engage with youth and be also a preventive and aftercare solution to the situation. Perfect. So I'm going to transition us to our second case. Oh, can we go back to our second case, please? Okay, so for the sake of time, we're going to be moving on to our last case. So communities nationwide are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's causing a lot of stress and anxiety amongst the youth population. Teenagers report feeling very overwhelmed during this outbreak, from school and events being canceled to seeing really devastating news about the coronavirus. With also feeling isolated at home and being scared, this is evoking more anxiety. So with the first question, that I would like you guys all to answer. How can we step up to help our communities, especially youth during this pandemic, specifically mental health services? So some of the responses are check in regularly with each other, calling youth to check in with them, see if they're really interested in Zooming, Skyping, or what kind of support they need, reach out to your students, make sure they know resources and provide coping skills, engaging in groups online, which are all amazing ideas. Create a warm hotline, secure line for students to call in to talk to someone. Offer telehealth services to provide accurate information related to COVID-19. Reach out to students at home via Zoom, which is all perfect ideas. So we're going to be transitioning to our second question and really trying to develop and incorporate a youth-led intervention to really educating students on what to do during this pandemic and decrease the stigma of receiving mental health services. And some of your responses are reaching out with a phone to those at risk, especially to those who are especially being affected with this pandemic, like youth being in marginalized communities, having open forums for youth through virtual learning tools to talk about their problems. Exactly, really engaging youth and having a support system amongst the youth population for sure. And another idea to definitely go along with responses is working with schools during this time to ensure that they provide these mental health resources virtually to youth, such as counselors and teachers being open during office hours to talk. Exactly, and like finding out how your school is reaching out to students and using that form to reach out with information about mental health. Perfect. So I want to thank you all for participating in this interactive activity and producing so many great responses. So now that you all brainstorm ideas on addressing issues around the stigma of mental health, I'm going to pass it along to Brooklyn to be leading you onto strategies to creating an effective youth-led intervention.
Thank you, Christina. Like you said, my name is Brooklyn, and I will be discussing various strategies for leading and creating a youth-led intervention. For starters, scheduling an event, creating a campaign, or social media accounts are easy ways to get started. Across the nation, there are various campaigns and clubs for mental health. The campaigns I chose were Stress Last Week, NAMI Walks, and How Full Is Your Cup. Some clubs were Bring Change to Mind, Mindfest, and East San Gabriel Valley. I will highlight How Full Is Your Cup and Bring Change to Mind on the coming slides. How Full Is Your Cup is a campaign developed by students to encourage their peers to not engage in risky behaviors. By doing this campaign, students were able to feel supported and were able to identify various stressors in their life. The funding for this campaign was through AT&T's $300,000 donation efforts to support mental health, specifically in Kansas and Missouri. Bring Change to Mind is a nationwide club that brings awareness through mentoring and student involvement. 250 schools have a Bring Change to Mind club with 7,500 students participating nationwide. When starting your club, you will receive a $500 grant and an invitation to the Bring Change to Mind Student Summit from the Bring Change to Mind organization. In regard to the current situation with COVID-19, meetings for your clubs can still happen. An easy way to do this would be through a Zoom meeting similar to our council bi-weekly ones. Don't let this pandemic stop you from starting your own club. In my community, we have a one-day event called Mindfest. At this event, different mental health resources are able to come and talk to people. It was started and funded by the Mind Coalition, which is an organization that hopes to use this opportunity to break the stigma. So, funding your youth-led intervention can come from a variety of different places: grants, fundraisers, donations, and community events. An example would be the 2020 Overnight Walk for Suicide and Mental Health as a community event that brings in donation money, or applying for a grant to expand your local school-based health center through creating a club. After all of this, you may be wondering, what can you do? Whether it's through surveys or creating a campaign to actively engage students, you can work to break the stigma of mental health. From our presentation, we hope you learn that students are key in breaking the stigma. Students need a safe place to talk, which you can take part in creating. I chose this quote by Michelle Obama: "At the root of this dilemma is the way we view mental health in this country. Whether an illness affects your heart, your leg, or your brain, it's still an illness and there should be no distinction." I chose this quote because I think it highlights what we hope to achieve in breaking the stigma, that mental health is just as important as physical health. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Feel free to reach out to us on email or social media. Now we would love to answer any questions you may have, and remember that you and youth can break the mental health stigma.
Thank you. Now is the time to enter your questions into the chat box in your Zoom control window. While you are entering your questions, we have a few announcements we would like to share with you. Please join us and become a member. The School-Based Health Alliance works to improve the health status of children and youth by advancing and advocating for school-based healthcare. Our members extend and support our work. Trainings like this webinar would not be possible without the support of our members. In addition, our members receive exclusive access to valuable program tools, timely publications, and networking opportunities. Please take a moment after this presentation to visit www.sbh4, that is the number 4, all.org/membership for more information and to join. The 2020 National School-Based Healthcare Convention will be held June 23rd through the 25th at the Sheraton Denver downtown in Denver, Colorado. Join the School-Based Health Alliance, the Colorado Association for School-Based Healthcare, and your peers from around the nation for 3 days of engaging fun, networking, and workshops. The theme for the meeting is School-Based Healthcare, Elevating a School Climate of Health and Safety. As a premier national gathering for our field, The convention is a fantastic opportunity to connect with hundreds of fellow school-based healthcare professionals and advocates from across the nation. Registration is now open. Also taking place at the convention is the Be the Change Youth Training Program. Be the Change is an opportunity for youth aged 14 through 18 to connect with like-minded peers from around the country who are passionate leaders of change in their schools and communities. Through exploration of health and education topics, advocacy and leadership skills development, and networking with each other and school-based healthcare advocates, Be the Change gives young people a platform to expand their knowledge and confidence as directors of their own health and champions of youth voices. There are scholarships available to assist youth with hotel accommodations, and the first 25 youth applicants will receive discounted registration. Please visit our website for more information on the Be the Change Youth Training Program. We know that the coronavirus is a concern for everyone. We will continue to monitor local and national reports on the evolving impact of the virus, as well as seek guidance from the Center of Disease Control, the World Health Organization, and applicable public health agencies. The health and safety of our attendees and staff is our top priority. At this point, we encourage you to continue to register for the event with the full confidence that should the convention be canceled, your registration fees will be fully refunded. You can monitor our convention webpage for updates. If you enjoyed this webinar and would like to learn more about engaging with youth, the School-Based Health Alliance has partnered with the Society for Public Health Education for their School Health Webinar Series. Join us on May 5th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to learn more about engaging youth in healthcare and how youth development is a key for fostering youth partnerships, community connectedness, and the power of the youth voice. Now we will respond to any questions. If there are no further questions, you should be viewing a poll question on your screen at the moment. Please take a few moments to answer those polls.
I do see a question in the chat about how have you successfully recruited members to participate in your Youth Advisory Council?
Hi, so my name is Nicole and I'm one of the leaders of the Youth Advisory Council, and so I just want to go ahead and answer that question. What we have done in the past is, so for Youth Advisory Council at a school-based health center or at a high school, we've actually just tapped into the existing leaders at the school. So tapping into the student council, tapping into sports groups. But I'm a huge advocate for, or we are huge advocates of just tapping into the students that are already coming into your school-based health centers. They're going to be your biggest advocates because they're the ones receiving the services. They're the ones that have the testimonies and the stories to tell. And so when it comes to then eliminating stigma, or like the council was talking about, or trying to just advocate the resources that you are offering for the students, they're going to already be familiar with that. And so those are probably the two main ways of recruitment, is tapping into existing leadership organizations, but also tapping into the students that are coming into your school-based health centers.
Thank you. There is also a question about if any of the council members, or Byla and Andre, can you give details again on the YPAR survey and what states were involved?
Yeah, sure. So Pretty much. The YPAR survey was a tool that we conducted using Survey Gizmo, and essentially we kind of sent it out through each council members in each of our areas. So the states that were included were Arkansas, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Florida, and that again was based on the outreach that we had. So the survey was open from the 3rd to the 22nd. And again, we used social media to kind of put it out there. The survey was split into 2 different sections. So it was between those who had and have not received mental health services. And based on that, that's how we compiled our responses and were able to get the data in the way that we had it so that we could see the differences between those who have received services and those who have not. So I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. There was one other question earlier in the chat. Bear with us 1 second as we're looking to find it. Sorry. Apologies, there was a lot of great conversation in chat. Okay, how do you see COVID-19 impacting stigma around mental health for youth? And how do we help support and involve youth that previously didn't have identified mental health issues? So for any of the council members who have suggestions around either of those, how do you see COVID-19 impacting stigma around mental health for youth, and how do providers and support staff support and involve youth who previously didn't have identified mental health issues?
For the stigma portion, it's going to depend on, each community individually, but overall, I think that this is going to kind of lessen the stigma, just from what I've seen and a lot of campaigns that are going on as we're all self-isolating. A lot of people are talking about their mental health, I think, more openly, or encouraging people to talk about it more openly, especially because we're all kind of dealing with the same thing at the moment, being isolated in our individual situations. So I'm hoping that it's gonna lessen the stigma. But again, it's really hard to say, and it's gonna vary by state, by county, whatever the community is.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andre.
Okay. So just piggyback off of my team member Emma, I definitely believe that COVID-19 will produce some good results as far as youth being more comfortable with sharing their mental state, because like she said, everybody's going through some of the same things, whether no matter where you are, we all have to take shelter, and not only that, but just shelter in place. So with that, we do see a lot of advertisements and promotions around, people just asking, how are you doing mentally? Is your mental state okay? How are you feeling having to stay in the house, whether it be by yourself or with a home full of people? Because whether you're alone or surrounded by people, they can both be taxing on you as an individual. And for that second part of the question, as far as what could health-based centers do to make sure that to help youth that may have not had pre-existing mental state issues, what they could do is continue to promote, continue to raise awareness by posters, and continue to host campaigns that highlight the importance of mental health, and also continue to let youth know, and even adults and parents know, that it's okay. Mental health is not something that is peculiar. It's not something that is not normal. It's something that happens that can affect everyone. And by parents being a part of that conversation, they can then help their youth to come out and be more open with how they're feeling internally.
I wanted to just quickly add on to that and just say that I feel like now more than ever, since that, the majority or the other factors of our lives have sort of been canceled out because of the virus, we actually have time to actually reflect on the mental health aspect of ourselves. And I feel like this is something that is at least the bright side on this, and the fact that people are able to really look within themselves and feel like, okay, what do I need to improve within myself, or how can I better get the help that I need, or what's either supporting me or not supporting me from receiving the services that I need. And again, with the second part of the question, for example, YPAR. YPAR is another tool that can be used. Taking surveys out to youth virtually. The conversation doesn't have to stop just because you're not doing it in person anymore. So now it's all about being resourceful. And again, like Andre was saying, like marketing through social media, through parents, and again, making sure that it's something that is collective. And yeah, so I really just feel like the stigma is something, like Emma was saying, is going to be lessened, because now we're all facing that. We're all facing having to be isolated.
And I also definitely want to add on to that. Not only are social media is very powerful, and also parents, but also schools, like working with schools really during this time as schools are transitioning into distance learning, right? To make sure that school administration is taking the action to actually provide mental health resources and the information virtually to you. And this could be through counselors and teachers being open during office hours to really talk, and having schools be really understanding, especially during this time for youth.
All right. If there are any additional questions that you have for the Youth Advisory Council, you can send them over to the email that is on your screen now. Or if you want to send it directly to their email account, this presentation will be posted on the School-Based Health Alliance website in 1 to 3 business days. We want to thank you for attending our webinar today, and our sincerest thank you to our presenters. Have a wonderful day.